Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our presentation on increasing accessibility in computer science through asynchronous and self-paced courses. My name is Victoria Berkowitz. I'm a high school computer science teacher. I also teach robotics. This will be my third year at Mineola High School. And before this, I was a software developer. So I love bringing industry practices that are relatable into the classroom.
My name is Curry DeFeedy. I am a computer science teacher leader here at Mineola, and I also coach the robotics teams, both the First Tech Challenge and First Robotics Competition teams. This is my 13th year teaching, and it's my 4th year experimenting with asynchronous learning. So first of all, why we started this experiment 4 years ago. So we had students who took a computer science class or weren't able to take a computer science class, and they wanted to take more, but it didn't fit in their schedule. And this could be because often the advanced computer science electives at our school are only held one period. We're a smaller school. We only have about 200 kids per grade. And students have other electives and the schedules didn't fit, or they needed classes to graduate certain specific classes, and so they weren't able to fit it in their schedule. So we wanted to offer this. Also, we have students who learn differently and they appreciate having a different way of learning and to be able to take more agency of their learning. So between all of this flexibility, accessibility, we decided to offer courses asynchronously and self-paced to help meet the needs of these learners. So our challenge, or really our challenge statement, was how do we increase student accessibility and participation in computer science? And so our solution to this is asynchronous and self-paced courses, and we're going to tell you about what we did.
So before we get into that, I just want to make sure that everyone has the same understanding of what asynchronous courses are and self-paced courses. So we have synchronous courses, which are typically the traditional classroom styles that we teach in nowadays. With asynchronous, there are no regular meetings. Learners work at their own pace. It's very flexible. They could work on their free periods in school or even at home. And with asynchronous, we have our learners who initiate their learning, and we have the teacher who ends up guiding or supporting. Self-paced is different from asynchronous in that they typically meet regularly in a classroom. Just like asynchronous, learners work at their own pace, but they also have those flexible deadlines. And in a self-paced class, because you're meeting regularly, there's a lot of conferencing and teacher support.
So we don't have an actual poll, but if you could just type in the chat, how do you currently teach your classes? If you're not currently a classroom teacher, what are you seeing in the classroom? Are you already experimenting with asynchronous and self-paced? Or are you mostly doing synchronous courses? So if you could just put that in the chat. And I just want to say, if at any point you have any questions, you can put it in the chat. We have it open here on the side.
Yeah, so we have a lot of people doing synchronous, trying to get the feeling of self-paced, yeah. And also, we teach synchronous as well as asynchronous and self-paced. So even though we've added those course offerings, we haven't left behind or gotten rid of our synchronous courses. Oh, independent study.
Independent study, yeah. Developing asynchronous content. Okay.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of it out in the wild these days. Yep, very good way of putting it.
Yeah, you're welcome to come for a visit.
Yeah, you can come to our wild and see.
Yeah. Yeah, synchronous, but the students are on different students lag, and I was wondering, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So with my initial hesitance teaching self-paced courses is I was hesitant to give my kids the freedom to choose how they were going to work in their time. I mean, we, teachers who work in synchronous classes, we help manage their time and still we see kids struggle. So how would a class look like if you gave kids complete freedom on how to choose their time? I will say that was my biggest fear. And I will say by the end of this, you'll see why I'm glad I got over that fear, because doing self-paced has been really beneficial to my kids.
So I was also extremely hesitant when I started. The school asked me to help facilitate these asynchronous courses. The first course we implemented was a intro to Python, a college level intro Python course. And teaching intro level courses synchronously, I know that a lot of just getting started is the students hesitant to get started, and they're unsure if they can be successful in computer science. And I felt like in my classroom I really created a good community and good interactions with the students, and I was just really worried that if the student is doing this all asynchronously, they might get frustrated, they won't be as successful, they're not going to have the same supports. So I was really kind of against it, to be honest, in the beginning. But I really, after implementing it, I've changed my tune, and I really see how beneficial it is for diverse learners. So we want to talk a little bit about like the nitty gritty, like how did we make this happen? So the first thing that was important, especially for the asynchronous, is to have this support from our school's administration. So they gave us curriculum writing. We came in the summer to help create this pathway, this learning pathway that students could work through. And then also they have given me, so my schedule, we usually teach 5 courses here. I only teach 4, so I can have that support period to help with the students with the asynchronous classes. So it's counted as part of my full-time day. Another thing that's really important, I think, you don't have to do it, but it was really helpful for us, is to leverage pre-existing resources. So there are so many good content out there for computer science now. So some of the ones we've used in our own classrooms are CodeHS, CMU Academy, Kidoyo, Code.org. So all of these have some resources that allow for students to self-pace. And while we don't use them like only one platform, it's helpful to have that auto grading and things so students can get immediate feedback if you're maybe not next to them. And the final thing we did for asynchronous courses is we utilized this lesson model. So we based it off of our music classes. So in our orchestra, they may pull out the violins for one period, and they rotate the periods in the day so that they can get that more one-on-one support. So we do a similar thing with our courses. I may pull out all of the intro Python kids, and I'll pull them out first period 1 week, and then the next week I pull them out second period, and then the next week I pull them out third period. So they're only missing one particular class, maybe once every 8 weeks, but they still get that one-on-one, or not one-on-one, but small group feedback for the course.
For self-paced courses, we also needed that support from our administration to grade differently. When you have a self-paced course, all of your students are going to be on different journeys in their learning. And so it's really important to honor where they are at. With a traditional class or a synchronous course, we're typically grading everyone on meeting the same milestone at the same time. So that was a big help in being flexible and doing that with our kids. One way that we made sure we had accountability in our self-paced courses was utilizing a daily record. So in our class, that looked like a Google form. So I created this Google form. It had 3 major chunks to it: the beginning, the middle, and the end. And so the beginning would prompt our kids to plan what they were going to learn for the day. And that would look like them looking at the entire pathway, what was open for them to learn, and choosing what would be on their goals, what activities, and what this would look like. The middle part of our Google form, so it would be the same Google form that they would keep open and just refer back to during our class, would kind of be like a middle checkpoint. So if the first half of the period, they really struggled with getting their work, they still had the second half of the period to utilize their time effectively. And it would look like them answering how well they felt like they were making progress toward their goals they set for themselves. The end of that Google form is like the last 3 or 4 minutes of class. And that allowed our students to reflect on, what do they felt like was the most important learning points? How well did they achieve their goals? And those are really important because every student's going to be in a different learning position than the others. And so for them to be able to name what they learned that day is really critical. Something else that self-paced courses benefit from that asynchronous does too are those auto-grading parts. Being able to use tools that exist that help auto-grade and give that instant feedback are really, really important in helping students know where they need to go next or how to keep going without those bumps in the road, especially if you're conferencing or spending one-on-one time with another student.
I want to say, like, it also, like, it allows for this culture of it's okay to fail. So I really like that the ones that auto grade and you get instant feedback, like, oh, this isn't right. And sometimes it helps and sometimes they need a little bit of help working through, but it allows students to just try and fail and know that that's part of learning. And so I think that's great. And it's great. CS just works really well with that. So in our courses, we found that check-ins, feedback, and peer interaction are some of the most important things. And they're not exactly what you think of when you think of asynchronous or self-paced learning, but they're really important. So check-ins is just meeting with the student, letting them know how they're doing. With the self-paced, when they're in the classroom every day, we try to check in with the students every day or every other day if it was a larger class and see how they're doing. In the asynchronous, I tried to check in with students once a week. Sometimes when I check in with a student, especially in an asynchronous course, they may have done nothing. From one week to the next, they've done nothing. And that's really okay because they're working at their own pace. But the check-in is still important because it lets them know that you're there. It lets them know that you're there to support them. And if they need any help, there's someone there. And it also helps them with their own self-regulation. Just reminder, I have this course that I'm taking. I need to make sure I schedule that at some point. Feedback, we talked a lot about the immediate feedback from a lot of these tools that are available. We also try to give one-on-one detailed feedback from ourselves and encourage the students to reflect and provide feedback about themselves so that they can give their own self-agency. They know what they're doing. And often we find that that's more helpful than feedback from us, although we still give it as well. And then finally, peer interaction. So if a student is working at their own pace, they can feel really isolated. So it could be lonely and really isolated. So we really worked hard to try to still foster this peer interaction, whether it's making the small groups where we pull out together, or having some days in the classroom where we're not working independently, but we're doing things together. We want students still to feel a community. We want them to feel like they have someone that they can go to, that they're not in this alone. So that's something we purposely put into our courses. So these are our current offerings. Most of these, we do offer college credit as well through LIU Post. This year, we have object-oriented programming and cyber are new asynchronous courses for us. So every year we're adding one. We started with just the Python and we're adding new ones every year. You can see that some of these courses, they're offered asynchronously. They're also offered self-paced. We have courses, we offer the object-oriented and the cyber as well, in person synchronously. So a lot of these courses kind of go between different modes.
So some of the benefits and outcomes that we have seen from self-paced courses is that we definitely have more student buy-in. Because our kids are picking out which activities that they're doing for the day and setting those goals for themselves, we see a lot more ownership of work. We also see, surprisingly enough, increased productivity. So I mentioned earlier my initial hesitance with my kids being productive in the time they had. We actually have had 127% increase in the learning goals met when we turn this into a self-paced course. We see that our kids are much more motivated. We also have seen a personalized learning experience. So we have kids that come into these courses with all different abilities, some with CS experience, some with no experience in CS. And so being able to take that extra time on certain units or be able to move through a unit faster has really helped them and not get bogged down. We also have some kids, for example, I had a student last year who has ADHD. And so being able to chunk up his time, how he sees fit, has been really beneficial for his work. For example, he would set a goal. Instead of working the entire period or a very long time, he would work for 15 minutes as hard as he could. And then he would give himself a 5-minute break to just chill out and look on his phone. And so that was really awesome to see. We also saw an increase in self-regulatory skills because of our kids being able to pick their goals for the day, create those goals, reflect on those goals. They were so much better at being able to name what they learned that day, or being able to create goals when I didn't put that daily record in front of them. We also had a lot of great rapport and trust because I offered so much freedom in the classroom with time. I trusted my kids a lot and they trusted me as well. And so it took a lot of pressure and effort away from classroom management, trying to manage everything and being able to trust them with their own time. This allowed me to do so much more with one-on-ones and conferencing and build such great relationships. And lastly, our academic mindsets about learning goals increased. We used PERTS, if anyone's familiar with that. It's a survey. And so we were able to measure. And so their academic mindsets about learning goals increased about 11%. So here's one of my students, Keshvia. She actually took this self-paced course in game design last year. She thrived and really did well in it. She ended up, she's now taking 3 computer science courses this year synchronously.
So I just want to go back. Carol had a question. So are each of these considered a different prep for teachers? So the courses that are self-paced are in the school day and they're considered a regular class. So the game design, robotics, Python, web design, those are in the course day as a regular course. For the asynchronous courses, they're not necessarily counted as their own prep. So we did a lot of work during the summer to create this independent pathway so that there is not that much work that the teacher needs to do during the year. So during the year, I meet with the students, I check in, I help them out, kind of almost like an office hours. Sometimes I'll have students from 3 different courses in the room at the same time. And then I grade their midterms and their final projects. We do have separate assessments from the self-paced ones, just you know, to give them something different to test their knowledge. So the self-paced are considered a normal class, but then the asynchronous, so I'll run a lot of these with my 1 period prep. But a lot of them I do teach. So I teach the Python in class as well, right? I have that self-paced, the object-oriented programming. It's essentially APCSA. I teach that synchronously as well. So a lot of them are the same content that we're teaching in different ways, but the asynchronous kind of gets bumped in together as the prep, if that makes sense. So some of the benefits of the asynchronous courses is that it's increased enrollment in all of our computer science courses. So not just the asynchronous, but also in the synchronous and the self-paced. So I found that before we started this, there would be a student who maybe takes AP Computer Science A their sophomore year. They want to study computer science. They're all excited, but they can't fit it into their schedule because they need, you know, AP Physics or whatever else, you know, they wanted to do. They want to take Italian. They can't fit the computer science, the only computer science class in their schedule. And so they just don't take computer science junior and senior year, and they go off to college, but they haven't had computer science for 2 years, and that's what they wanted to major in. So that to me was, I think, the thing that really, okay, like let's explore this. So we've seen that students, they'll take an asynchronous course if that fits in their schedule, and then maybe the next year they come back and they do a synchronous course or a self-paced course. And so we found that it keeps them involved, it keeps them in the computer science community, and we've increased our enrollment like throughout all the courses. Last year, we had 1/3 of our students who were taking advanced computer science courses were taking them asynchronously. So it really has just increased our offerings, and I think that that's just going to continue. We actually have people just asking left and right, like when they're going to start this year. Another thing that I thought was amazing is that in our asynchronous courses, we have 52% female enrollment. So we're still working on that in our synchronous courses. I think we're at about 30% on the upper level electives. And so that's something we're actively trying to increase. But we found that this mode of asynchronous seems to work better for our female learners. So that was really cool for us to see. And it allows students to explore different interests and have a personalized learning experience. So, you know, for some students, computer science is not their whole world, and that's okay. And they're able to take other electives but still participate in these classes. So, yeah. This is a quote from one of my students, Robert. He started taking Python in 8th grade. And it's just taken asynchronous courses every year. I don't think I've actually had him in a synchronous course until this year. And it's like a senior special project. He's actually only a junior, but like a special projects course. And he's exploring like how to interact with the ChatGPT APIs. So it's really cool that he's able to go to this level without actually taking one in person. So it says, what percentage of your students 3 years ago were enrolled in CS versus now? So in our school, we do have all of our freshmen enrolled in computer science principles. So we're mostly focusing on above that. I would say 3 years ago, we had maybe 40 kids out of, what would you say, 10 to 12, that would be out of 600?
600, yeah.
Yeah. So 40 kids out of 600. And now we're at like 85, no, 100 and what did I say? 80 in person and 46, 120. So I guess we're getting to about a fifth. My math? Yeah.
I think so. Correct us if we're wrong.
Yeah. So, so we've gone with, if you're thinking about the population from grades 10 to 12, 600 students, we've gone from about 40 to about 120. So. So when designing a course asynchronously, so, you know, we had that time to do it over the summer, it's important that you have an easy navigation for students. So this is a screenshot from CMU Academy, but I know CodeHS and Kidoyo and other courses have, you know, a clean area where they can see what they need to do. It's important to incorporate diverse ways of delivering content. I know just from being with students, some students, like, they look at a screen of words and say, I can't read this, Ms. DeFeedy, like, no, thank you. Please give me a video. And I have other students who are like, Ms. DeFeedy, I can't take another video. I just want to read it and get through it. So everybody's different. And so it's good to incorporate diverse ways, different ways, so that students can choose how they're going to learn the material. The automated checks, I know we've said it several times. I can't reinforce it enough. It's so nice for them to have that immediate feedback and be able to fail and feedback and fail and feedback until they get it. And you want to have your course created so that the students can progress at their own pace. So it's good to have it created before the class even starts. So our asynchronous courses linked to their gradebook or report card. So right now, what we're doing is we have it on the report card, but we don't always report it at the beginning of the year because students are working at different paces. So we're kind of working around that. I definitely give a grade at the end of the year. And most of the asynchronous courses are actually college credit. So I'm actually putting the grade on the LIU transcript as well.
We have periods. So we have 9 periods in a day, if that answers your question.
Yeah. So we have 9 42-minute periods, and most classes meet every day. Traditional classes meet every day.
Okay. So for assessment and grading, these obviously have to look different for a self-paced course or an asynchronous course. We've been able to adapt our traditional grading systems to help ourselves do much more continuous assessment. Just like Ms. DeFeedy was talking about, having that auto grader is really critical and essential here, because it helps nudge the kids in the right direction and like allows them to do the work in their own time. But it also just gives them that mindset that it's okay to fail, just like in the real world. We also see students taking ownership of their learning goals and what they're going to learn for the day. So that Google form that I mentioned earlier, here's a screenshot of it. This is actually a student response from last year, and it is the end portion of the Google form. So here this asks, how well did I achieve my goal or master out what I set to learn? what were the most important points I learned today, and what can I do differently next time? What kept me from achieving my goals, or what worked really well? So we actually use, or in the self-paced course, we use this daily record as part of their grade to help measure how much effort they're putting in and how well they're working toward their goals. As you can see, the students are really honest. This one said, I was able to achieve my goal because I was focused and paid attention to what I was doing. I've also had students just flat out say, I didn't do a great job. I was on my phone too much and I got almost nothing done. And that's okay too, because I talked with that student and the next class they did so much better. And so that continuous improvement is really what we're looking for.
So, we've been doing this for 4 years now, and we've reached some challenges along the way. So sometimes we found students were not utilizing their time well. They might not do anything on their pathway or their course and then try to get it all done at the end of May. Students felt isolated. They felt like they didn't have anyone they could go to. They didn't feel like they had anyone they could ask for help, which also led to them procrastinating, not working on the course. And some students are they're not used to learning at their own pace. They're not used to taking ownership of their learning. And so that's a skill that I think in the beginning we assumed that they had, that we realized we need to actually work with them to cultivate.
So some tips that we have for self-paced is definitely build community. So I know we hit upon that earlier, but even in a self-paced course where I have a classroom full of kids, it can still feel very isolating because every kid is on a different point in their learning journey and they're not sure who to ask for help or who they can talk to about their activity, maybe vent or something like that. So the ways that I combat this is just by taking days where we just do activities that have nothing to do with our pathway to build that classroom rapport and that community. Something else I also do is I use that daily record or just my conferencing to see where my kids are at. And then the next day, what I'll do is I'll pair up kids who are in similar milestones and be like, today is going to be a pair programming day. So just things like that make a big difference. Another thing that I think is really important is regular feedback from themselves, from their peers, and from their teacher. And so the daily record, of course, is very self-reflective. Having peer feedback, sometimes I would just pair the kids together for that day. They would work on what they were going to anyways, but they were going to verbalize their goals to each other. And then they were going to assess each other on how well they thought they met their goals. And that also helps to build community. And lastly, teacher feedback is really important. So even though there's so much auto grading, it doesn't mean you can't go in there and point out what you think the student did well, what they could work on. And it doesn't have to be feedback just on their work. It could also be feedback on their progress. So me in my self-paced courses, sometimes I'll give feedback and say, like, I see that you set this goal for yourself. I think you can do more. I think you could set a more challenging goal for yourself. Or I think, you didn't really name your learning points appropriately today. Like, let's work through that together. And so that really helps them get them started and know where they need to be and continue through the course. Something else that's super important is to make it personalized. If you're going to have a self-paced course, they should be able to come to the course or the class that day and feel like that class is there for them. So something we do is do a student-created playlist. So at the beginning of the year, I'll ask all my students to give me their school-appropriate songs and add it to a playlist. And so when they come to class, I have the music playing already, lightly in the background, and that just helps create a really warm and welcoming environment. Something I found very useful was to explain your reasons for your ways of doing things. So I do this daily record, I do self-paced, but that doesn't necessarily mean that my kids know why I'm doing it or even if it's useful. I actually had the first time I did this, my kids were like, I don't understand this. Like, why do I have to write down what I'm going to do today? Why can't I just do it? And so I took a whole period to explain to them, these are actually self-regulatory skills. These are skills that you would use later in life. And I would show them examples of how they would use those skills in college and how they would become very successful if they mastered those skills. And after that, I could see actually that there was more buy-in to doing those, and they had a much more higher appreciation for doing the daily record and having accountability. And lastly, I would say switch it up. So even though it's really cool that you could do self-paced and you could do what you want when you want in class, it can get really monotonous. And so being able just to do something like we did a fun Friday. So we'd have fun Fridays where we would do maybe a traditional class where I picked out something that they wanted to learn and I taught them in a very traditional way, or we just did activities that were slightly different. And so that keeps having the self-paced learning fresh and new when they come back the next week.
So some tips I have for asynchronous is to meet with students intentionally. And I realize that this may seem like it's not asynchronous if you're meeting with students regularly, but they're still working through most of it on their own, but just having that intentional meeting. So I set it up to be once a week. It doesn't need to be once a week. It can be whenever, whatever works with your schedule, whatever works with the student's schedule, but just having that intentionality, like I'm going to meet with you at this time and we're going to discuss your progress and we're going to see if there's anything I can help you with or if there's any questions you have. And making that, I think the initiation from the instructor is good because there are some students who are just shy and they're not used to learning like this and they're unsure of how to proceed. So having that regular contact in whatever interval works for you, I think is important. And as we've said, building that community, building those relationships, bringing the students together is great. I have on here suggested due dates. I didn't start with suggested due dates. This was actually feedback from the students. So they asked me if I could add suggested due dates so they could keep track of themselves. Am I on track to finish this by June or not? And do I need to move faster or do I need to move slower or can I just finish this and be done with it? So I added those dates in my second and third year so that students could help keep track of their own progress. Another thing we have here is office hours. So office hours is something that is used in college a lot when the professor is available. And so I have periods of the day where I don't schedule check-ins explicitly, but I tell the students like you can come down. Mostly I do it during their lunch period. So I say you can come in your lunch periods and work if you want, and I can help you out. You could do before school or after school. One of the benefits I found is I actually teach a self-paced course during the lunch periods of the day. And so sometimes my synchronous kids will actually come in to the self-paced course and work, and they're actually working on the same thing so they can collaborate with each other as well. So if they have lunch that period, they may come in for a day and work together. So it's pretty cool to have that kind of cross community as well. We recommend using, online tools, not trying to get a student to set up a complicated IDE on their machines at home. Sometimes I find that leads to frustration. So we use things that are easy to set up that can work on different computers, different OSs, and things that already have resources available to you is always helpful. And always look to keep improving. So, you're not going to do it right the first time. There's going to be things that you can change. There are things that we're still changing year after year. I constantly ask the students for feedback. I, see my own feedback. We bounce things off each other. So know that whatever iteration you put in, if it's just self-paced, asynchronous, whatever you start with, you're going to be improving it and looking for feedback to make it better. And what works for us here isn't necessarily what's going to work at your school. So figuring out that. So here are just some of the tools that we used. This is by no means exhaustive, but code.org, CMU Academy, CodeHS, those are all really great coding platforms. Kiddo as well. I see Khan Academy as well. We just use that in cyber. Using Canvas, Google Classroom, any sort of learning management system you have, you want to create a pathway that's in one place. So, if we create it in Canvas and maybe they go out to these other resources, or maybe, it's good enough that you can just use the CodeHS pathway and then check in with them as well. But making sure they have one central place to go to. You saw the Google Forms with Ms. Berkowitz and her check-ins, and then HERTS is that survey that we use to evaluate the academic mindsets. Okay, yeah. So we usually for a course though, we would say like you're going to work through. So in my Python, I have them work through a Code HS pathway and also a Kid-Oyo pathway, and I kind of have their main thing is Canvas, and so then they know to go out to those two pathways, but or two challenges, but then their main pathway is in one place. So we usually tell them like this is the course you're working through, not necessarily give them multiple for one course, but it depends on each course what tool we're using. Okay.
So we just want to open the floor up to questions. If anyone has any.
I know you've been asking questions all throughout. Yeah. So are there any courses that were only synchronous? AP Computer Science Principles.
Yeah, AP Computer Science Principles is synchronous.
It used to be AP Computer Science A, but we're offering that now.
Yeah, we're offering that. Robotics right now is still technically synchronous, which makes sense. I think the rest of them have flexibility in that.
Yeah.
Just because when we do add these new courses, they get such an interest, and our superintendent like hates turning down anyone who's interested in taking a course. So if anyone has an interest in a course and they can't fit in their schedule, it is our job to make it asynchronous.
Do you have multiple classes in your self-paced room? So traditionally, no. Most of our self-paced rooms are one course. I did have this one period last year. I don't have it in my schedule this year, and it was just kind of like it's like an asynchronous, but I guess it's self-paced period. And I had students who were doing different pathways in that one course. But traditionally, we don't. But there's really no reason why they can't. How do you get so many students taking the AP CSA? So I do feel like CSP prepares these students to take AP CSA as sophomores. So I've been teaching AP CSA since I started. So 8 years. This is my 8th year teaching CSA. And of course, computer science principles didn't exist 8 years ago. And I found that after the year of computer science principles, the kids are so much better prepared for the course. We don't have, I mean, every student takes CSP, but we didn't have prerequisites for CSA before. So we would have students come in who had never done any coding before, and they come in prepared. And this year we're teaching computer science principles in Python, but in the past we did it in Scratch. And I still see a huge difference just in understanding loops and variables,
Booleans, just like the foundation things.
That I do think that CSP prepares them.
Congrats on teaching CSP your first year this year.
And all the changes too.
Yeah, you got a lucky year. I guess it looks like we have no more questions.
Yeah. So just some of our main, your district requires, okay, I know we got more.
Yes.
Okay, so our district does require all freshmen to take CS principles. Yeah. LIU courses cost, I want to say they're about $300, I think it's $290
for the early sign up.
To sign up, and it's a 3-credit course. So, and they've been a really great partner to work with, and we've been able to add new courses with them. So,
other bell.
42 minutes is up. So they've been great to work with. Yeah. Yeah, we should definitely connect off of this too, Brandon, especially since you may one day be teaching Victoria's
you're going to be teaching my kids.
We're definitely, and you're teaching a lot of the same courses, so we can definitely connect more. Yeah, so here are just some of our main takeaways. We found that it increases accessibility, enrollment. We've had way more students join in.
We've had, make sure to leverage those tools in auto grading. Those are super helpful. You're only one person.
Yeah. Build the relationships. It's still key. It's not, they're not just students on a computer. Make sure that you know them, they know you.
Keep iterating and do what works for you in your classes. Whatever we presented here, take what works for you. Please don't feel pressured to take any of it if none of it works for you. But pick what works well for you in your classes and try it out.
Yeah, just try it out.
I'm Marissa.
Yeah. Are there any exemplars or proposal or other resources? We could get you something. We can connect.
So,
we'll give our contact information.
Here are our emails. And then we also have educator Twitters or X's. I don't know what you call it now. But those are our usernames. Feel free to follow us or connect with us or email us. And we will be happy to send any material or tips your way.
Yeah, and happy to collaborate with anyone.
We're and totally learn from you as well. If you are trying out something we could learn from, we would love to hear about it.
Thank you all for coming.